Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Hey, Faith Positive Nation, Dr. Joey Fawcett here with you with another great episode of Faith Positive Radio. So if somebody walked up to you at work and said to you, hey, why are you a Christian? What would you tell them? Would you be able to tell your story of here's why I'm a Christian and here's why it benefits me and here's why I find it particularly helpful at work to be a Christian? Because I'm dealing with people like you? No, don't say that. You know what I mean? It's kind of stressful at work. So do you have a ready-made response to talk about why you're a Christian? You know, it's absolutely amazing as we talk to so many Christian business people. And this is year 5 for the Faith Positive Radio podcast. Just so many amazing guests that we've had on this program. However, on LinkedIn, oftentimes we'll find that people are commenting and interacting with me about these stories that we have business people tell. And then they show some interest and, enjoyed this story, da-da-da-da-da. And I'll say, well, hey, how about if you tell your story? Oh, no, I could never do that. Okay, well, today's guest is going to help you get to the point where you can say, yes, I can. Now, you may not want to come on Faith Positive Radio and do it in front of an international audience, but you can certainly discover how, with today's guest's help, how to, as Peter talks about, give that defense of your faith in all gentleness while you're in the workplace. So if you're hesitant to talk about Jesus at work and what your faith means to you, this episode of Faith Positive Radio has got your name written all over it, or maybe I should say your ears written all over it. So listen up and check it out as I get to talk to Todd Miechiels today. Todd's website is 315project.com. Todd, hey, welcome to Faith Positive Radio, buddy. Glad to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Joey.
Yeah, delighted to have you here. So you help Christian business people tell their story. How do you do that, Todd?
Well, the first thing that we do is I, as a businessman myself, that the last thing I ever wanted to do was tell my story.
Oh, really?
Someone challenged us to really just address the elephant in the room that a lot of us Christians don't want to tell our story for a number of reasons, but at the end of the day, I've learned that it boils down to fear or pride. So, the first step towards being willing to tell our story is being willing to be vulnerable enough to address the things that we're fearful of or prideful of, which I kind of relabel as what is it that you're trying to prove that would keep you from telling your story, and what is it that you're afraid of losing that would keep you from wanting to tell your story. And we start from
unpack that a little bit for me. Help me understand more. Fear and pride. And so I'm afraid of losing something.
Yeah. Well, what I do is this. I approach businessmen and women where they're at, and I say, and in our case, we offer people a chance to tell their story on a video camera and unleash it as an act of kind of worship, of surrender, of obedience. It's a big step for a lot of people. And we say, if we were giving you the chance to do that, or if your spiritual mentor or your pastor were giving you the opportunity to do that, be completely honest, just no shame, no guilt. How does your heart feel if it was a stoplight? Are you a red light, a yellow light, or a green light? Right? And we'll let them answer that question. And then we'll say, what do you think that's making your heart yellow right now? And they'll list things like, I could lose my job, or I'd have to live up to the testimony, or someone could see it.
Oh, so if I'm a Christian and admit to being one at work, then I got to be perfect. I can't ever lose my temper. I can't be short-sighted or anything like that, huh? Man, I'm sure glad it's not that way, Todd. I would not qualify for a Christian if I was the way it was. Wow. So what's the percentage of red lights, yellow lights, green lights that you get when you ask that question?
Very interesting question. I'm glad you asked it. So we go all over the country and we speak to groups, marketplace ministries, men's ministries, women's ministries, and regardless of age group, regardless of denomination, regardless of industry, about 20% of people are courageous enough to raise their hand red. Like, hey, there's no way in a million years I could do that. 20% raise their hands green.
All right.
60% are hesitant or cautious. But here's the thing. We say, raise your hand if you're a red. And they do. Raise your hand if a green. Those go straight up. And I'll say, if you're yellow, nobody raises their hand. All right.
Yeah, or it's kind of like I do this, I just stick my finger up, or I give the wave, Wow. So 60% are unaffiliated, so to speak. So they're just not sure about doing it. So how do you respond to those 60%?
Well, I address all three of them like this. I've been doing this kind of as just out of a calling for 9 years. So thousands of people. Mm-hmm. And I say, I experience now. If I'm wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. Uh-huh. Some of you that raise your hand red, if you lean into this invitation, not only will you tell your story, you'll be the most rocked by it. Some of you that raise your hand green, I promise you will not get through this process for some different reasons. And for the yellows, you're going to have to kind of make a kind of kairos decision. Like, if I'm yellow, am I desiring to move towards green, or am I going to let gravity of the world take me to red? So it's a very deep, quick, easy question to ask, but a very evasive heart question to intersect marketplace person with. It's fun.
Sounds like to me this question is about a lot more than just whether or not to shoot a video talking about your faith.
It definitely is.
Yeah. So what's it really about?
It's about two things for the participants. It's about helping them slow down, kind of put Christ first in their life, take a inventory of their time, their priorities, their idols, their passions, and a desire to become courageous and vulnerable and help God remind them of the love that he has for them and their identity in him. So it's a very profound, deep, deep journey that could easily be dismissed by a business guy saying, hey, I share my story all the time. Why should I do something like this?
Yeah. And that's a lot of the green lights, right? Yeah, I do that. Don't worry about that. I got it. People at work know I'm a Christian, blah, 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 blah. How about the red lights, man? How did they get to moving?
Well, I found no parallel between a person's self-professed spiritual maturity and their propensity to be red, yellow, or green. So we'll find a very...
Say that again slower. That's deep right there.
I found no propensity or parallel between a person's self-professed spiritual maturity level and their propensity to be red, yellow, or green.
Huh.
So you might have a Christian that's been, I'm an all-in,
right,
all in for Jesus Christian. I lead a Sunday school class. I've been doing it for 40 years.
Yeah.
But if you're going to ask me to get in front of a camera, talk about Jesus, and share it in a way that anyone could see it, I'll give you 24 reasons why I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to really tell you the real reason I'm not going to do it.
We're back to fear and doubt there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are people afraid of, Todd?
Well, most of the people say that I hear two things that are both sad. One is I don't think I have a story worth telling, which I'm like, man, I bet you if you said that to God, it would break his heart.
Yeah, that's probably not the best thing to say to God, is it? Oh, wow. I don't have a story worth telling. Man, there's a whole lot of stuff behind that, right? In terms of identity in Christ. Maybe I don't see myself as fully forgiven, or I haven't really received all the grace and love that's out there for me.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid of being found out that I'm not that interesting.
Yeah. Second one would be, and the first one also we bundled into an epidemic. It's pride, but it's more false humility, right? If I tell my story, what will people think of me, right? Which is prideful, it's also false humility. I've heard this one so sad, and not just to be clear, I've only been a Christian since I was 35 years old, so I'm learning this as I go. Quite frankly, I'm recognizing and observing the behavior of all-in Christian marketplace leaders that are 10, 15, 20 years further down the road of me. And I'm saying, whoa, man, what's going on here? The second one that's really sad is I hear people say, I don't want to put my Christian story up on online. Here's why. If people think I'm a Christian, they're going to associate me with all these hypocritical Christians, and I don't want to be associated with that. And I'm like, okay, this is your opportunity to actually reflect what Christ is.
Yeah.
In a world like that.
Yeah. That is sad, because if that's the real deal, looks like you'd be raising your hand and saying, "Hey, let me redefine the thing. Let me strike that match to light up the darkness there."
Yeah.
So when you get those responses, Todd, how did you respond?
The first thing I do is I pray that God would use me as a messenger of a messenger, and not a voice of judgment or like a prescription, right?
Yeah, because you got to meet these folks where they are, right?
So the first thing I try and do, and I'm blessed to have a pretty vast business network because of my previous career as a consultant, but I'll say, hey, whatever you just said or thought, I really don't care if you ever get in front of the video camera, but I would love to know what a spiritual conversation with you and your Heavenly Father sound like say that to him, right? Don't even let me know how the conversation goes, but because I bet you something to put on your heart that may be a Kairos moment for you.
So what you're really doing is provoking people to have spiritual conversations with their Father at a level of honesty that they may not have gone to previously.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
Wow. So you're prompting growth in Christ using a video camera. So how did you get into this, Todd? I mean, the Father gave you this idea, obviously. So how'd you back into it? You said you were a consultant for a while.
Yeah, I was an internet marketing consultant, working in the technology business-to-business world. And through a series of events, I was simultaneously going to a bunch of men's ministry mountain events where I was seeing guys getting vulnerable around tables and sharing their story. And then at the church I was going to, at least at the time, procedurally, if you wanted to get baptized, you had to tell your story in front of a video camera and let it be played in service. So I signed up to get baptized at the challenge of a discipleship brother, having no interest whatsoever in telling my own story or getting dunked in a tank. I just want to take a next step in my faith walk. And through this process, I grew up, I won't say the denomination, but I grew up largely in a denomination where I never heard the word testimony or witness or evangelism or anything like that. So when I signed up for baptism, they said, hey, we're looking forward to baptizing you. We need your written story in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I freaked out, totally freaked out.
I guess so. Wasn't 2 months, wasn't 2 years. It was 2 weeks, Todd. What'd you do?
It was spiritual vertigo. Like what in the world did I get myself into? I don't know the story. I'll be afraid, right?
So what'd you do? So, raise your hand with a red light and say, I didn't really mean I wanted to be baptized.
I signed up, and then I was going to back out. I told my wife, hey, I'm going to do this some other time.
Yeah, really.
But some loving guys came around me and they said, man, if you make this about you, you might as well quit. But if you can get it in your heart, this isn't about you, it's about God, you'll get through it. I had, with the exception of the decision to accept Christ, I had a very intensive, conscious decision to say, God, all right, I'm going to do this, but you're going to get me through it, because there's no way I would do this without you. And so I prepared my story. I memorized the story. I really understood, my relationship with Christ. And I'd been a Christian for 4 years at that point. And when I got to the filming date, I dabbled in video production 25 years earlier in high school, but I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. I don't see anything really complicated here. And I shared my story, and I was so blown away by the discipleship growth. They went, I use these words in hindsight, but I went from scared to prepared. I went from private to public. I went from not knowing my story, knowing my story. In a matter of 2 weeks with some intentional discipleship steps. And then they were able to capture the video and, thousands of people could see it, and I'd have you on LinkedIn. So I said, God, how could I use this in a way that would glorify you without me feeling like a Jesus freak, which is the language.
I just want to be Todd Miechiels, please.
And I'm looking at my LinkedIn page, and it says, okay, here's a link to your website, your blog. I said, gee, I wonder why I couldn't just put a link to my story. That's pretty non-evasive.
There you go.
That was 2010. And I said, wait a second. This is too simple and obvious that at least our own church, we shouldn't be just doing this for people that are dunking in the tank. We should be, I'm sitting in the balcony with a bunch of marketplace leaders. So I said, hey man, you don't even know me, but you're sitting on a neutron bomb of both discipleship and evangelism. Like, is there any reason we can't be giving this to those guys in the balcony? And they're just like, hey, that's a great idea, but that's not our mission. And so I went back to work, and like, long story, like many of us, like 6 to 9 months, God would not let it off my heart. And this became, I said, I'm going to do what I can do about it until some other folks agree that it's a good idea. And I'm doing it still.
Holy cow. So the idea got you. You didn't have an idea. The idea took hold of your heart. And man, yeah, God's like a old hound dog when he's on your trail, right? He just will not give you up till he gets you. Man, that's incredible. So what was it like as you began the business of helping people tell their story?
Well, it was funny. All this red light, yellow light, green light, like God equips the saints. He uses donkeys and stuff. So it's like,
oh yeah. I'm living proof.
I'll be straight up, right? So I have this burden on my heart, like, man, why isn't these churches doing this for their people? And God positioned me with a massive business network and a men's mountain retreat ministry context. So I started going up to the elder statesmen, if you will, these all-in Christians. I said, hey man, our church helped me tell my story, and I just feel burdened to pay it forward. Would you be willing to tell your story? And half of them said no. And I'm like, all right, I'm just like a baby Christian. I don't know why they said no. Maybe it's probably me.
You thought it was about you instead of them.
The other half that said yes, half of them, when it came time to get intentional about it, they were making up every excuse. But I arranged through just a lot of conviction. Okay, there were 7. I invited 30. 7 ended up saying yes and committing to it. So with having no intention of starting a ministry whatsoever, just trying to relieve this burden that.
Mm-hmm. So God would leave you alone, huh, Todd?
Exactly. My best attempt at replicating what this church had done for me was 7 businessmen. And that day was, as I suspected it would be, I'm like, okay, it was rewarding telling my story, but it was so much more rewarding helping someone tell their story. And I was hooked. I said, I will dedicate the rest of my life to advancing this cause, still having no intention of starting a ministry. I said to those 7 people, go back and tell your pastor what this meant to you, and tell them there's some business guy that's telling them they could totally do this at their church through volunteerism. And if they want to learn how, I'll be happy to volunteer. And here's something I hope that nothing else out of this whole episode gets to these business leaders' heads. None of them had the courage or the margin to go have that conversation with their pastor.
What?
They didn't. And I found out in hindsight, because a couple of times later, like 2-3 years later, would go by, and that pastor would call me with tears in his eyes, and he'd say, I just heard about what you're doing. This is something we've been praying for. I'm like, didn't you have a 5-minute conversation with so-and-so 3 years ago?
Yeah, were you not listening? And then you found out the messenger didn't go.
Well, what I'm suspecting is happening is, and gosh, people have been down the road before me would know a lot better than I would, but like, I think the pastors are wearing masks to some extent. The businessmen are wearing masks to some extent. They come in on Sunday, they worship, they consume. They're not having like a heart-to-heart 5-minute conversation. And it breaks my heart, because I've yet to find a business person that's experienced this that said, man, this would be a game changer for my church. And I've never met a pastor that wouldn't say this would be a game changer for my church, but the two are not talking.
Wow. So where's the disconnect, Todd? Where do you think that disconnect is between the pulpit and the pew?
Too stereotypical but I would suspect that I see businessmen that are my friends check their ROI brain and their efficiency and their effectiveness brains at the door on Sunday morning so they can go discipled and go worship God. And I think that they don't feel it's their place to offer suggestions of innovation and change, because for the most part, these churches, gosh, I'm going to sound soapboxy, but for the most part, these churches get established, deacons, elders, trustees, and they like to do things the way they've done it. But here's the problem. When we're living in a time when 95% of those people don't want to tell their story. So
Either the pew sitters have got to get up and walk towards the pulpit, or the pulpit's got to come down to the pew, one or the other, right, Todd?
Well, man, I'm telling you, like I looked at this. I think about it from the pastor behind the pulpit. I think about it from the person in the pew. The person from behind the pulpit, who could blame them for thinking, my people don't want to share their story? They're very content sitting on their hands every single Sunday getting good music. And people are in the pews. Why would they think truly that their story really, really is important or valued if the church isn't making much ado about recognizing the people that would be willing to tell their story and ministering to the ones that are honest enough to say, I'm not ready to tell my story?
Especially when we've got a paid storyteller up there for us, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So, man, maybe there's some level ground at the foot of the cross where the pulpit and the pew can meet. What do you think, Todd? Is that part of what you're doing with 315project.com?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've learned, I've had to try and pray that God would not let my heart become bitter or stony, because I feel like in a lot of ways I'm trying to kick down the doors of the local church. And God's just saying, quit trying to kick down doors and look for windows to minister. Marketplace is such a rich environment for that, because marketplace people are much more agile than an organizational church. Right? We can help Christians overcome the fear, the pride, the bondage, the hindrances that keep them from telling their faith, and say, hey, brother, sister, go back and tell your pastor what happened.
Just share your experience. It doesn't have to come with a recommendation. Let me just tell you what happened to me. But Todd, that still asks for a certain amount of vulnerability. I mean, it's one thing to get in front of a camera and share that with your own population, but to then go to a professional, if you will, like your pastor, and say, hey, I'm not a pastor, but here's what happened for me. There's a lot of vulnerability in that, brother. Yeah.
And I think that I'm learning. I'm 48 years old now, and I'm learning. This is, I think, just a principle of the human condition. We either believe it and are blessed by it, or we choose not to believe it. It's when we're our most vulnerable that we're not subject to shame and guilt. We're subject to love, right, and grace. And so that's something like, I can think of a scripture to be like, the truth will set you free. Bring the things to light, and God will use that to set you free. So I see a lot of myself included, like we all walk around with, it's just like, not only is the prison bars not locked, they're actually wide open, and God's inviting us to walk through it in vulnerability.
Yeah, and so the prison is within us.
Right? We live where people are getting persecuted for sharing their faith. We got unlimited freedom to do it, and yet we're sitting in the jail cell saying, I can't get out of this.
Yeah, and yet people, and you hear them, Todd, just like I do, they say, well, I don't know if I can talk about Jesus at work. I'm not sure what's allowed by HR or something like that. When, to your point, if you're just telling a story about how life got better for you, without judging or condemning other people or putting the thumb screws on them to have your experience, but just, hey, here's my experience. Nobody can argue with your story because it's your story. It's what happened for you. Hey, man, bless you. It's not going to be my story, but I'm going to bless your story.
Yeah. And here's something that people, like, I've found it difficult for people to see this, so I think about for 1 second. if you're concerned about what would happen if you shared your faith in a workplace environment, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Actually, telling your faith story on video and putting it on your social network is so far less evasive, because here's why. You're not going up to somebody and say, can I talk to you about Jesus?
Uh-huh.
You're actually putting a picture on your social profile that you could say, hey, here's my story if you want to hear it. Now that person in their own fruition is saying, I want to hear this story.
Mm-hmm.
They hit play.
Right.
Now there's talking to them. This is permission-based marketing.
Right.
If
right.
we talk about Jesus in an analog context, now there's some discomfort. But in the digital realm, they're like, I'm choosing to let this playhead play forward.
Right. It's an opt-in, right?
It's permission. Like people, naysayers of digital, that I think deep down themselves are fearful of sharing their own story digitally.
Mm-hmm.
They do common objections. Oh, we're more about relational evangelism. I say, what could be more relational than sharing an opt-in story in your relational community of friends and fellow classmates in a permission-based way?
Right.
Relational, I would argue, is like, I could go on next door to my neighbor.
Uh-huh.
There's no relevance there, and he certainly probably doesn't want to hear what I have to say. So it's of course not one or the other. It's the power of and.
Right.
But
yeah, but it's like a lower barrier to just click and opt in with a certain amount of anonymity, and I'm going to listen to your story. And if I want to know more, I'll reach out to you, right? I'll send you a LinkedIn message or a Facebook message or something and say, hey, Todd, I really enjoyed your story. I want to know more. Or how did this turn out? I didn't catch the resolution to that part of your story or something like this. Or what about this, Todd? And start bringing my own story into it. So there's still that extra degree of separation.
yeah.
And so some people, you're right, are really more vulnerable at a distance than they are up close and personal.
Yeah. It's, the other thing in a marketplace context, talking about faith at work,
mm-hmm.
The other thing I pray, it's like, Father, for those leaders out there that pride themselves on efficiency and effectiveness and ROI, right?
Yeah.
Stewardship, finishing well. I'm not saying that people need to get in front of a video camera, but I would like them to acknowledge this hypothesis. Someone invest 15, 20 minutes, step out of their comfort zone, lay their story down. Okay.
Right.
The story now goes anywhere and everywhere, 24/7. It can be clicked with one click of the mouse from that guy that you were in fraternity with who now has 1,000 friends. The ROI on that story, the incremental cost is zero, but the gospel impact goes on and on and on and on.
Oh, man. Yeah, that multiplier effect is huge, right?
Yeah.
It's a big lever right there set on the fulcrum of the cross, right? It just spins the whole thing out. Wow. Todd, somebody in Faith Positive Nation is going to want to reach out to you and discover more about this. They're going to want to talk about their own fear and doubt. They're going to want to say, hey, Todd, how do I get in front of a camera? Or they're going to say, I don't want any part of that. and begin that conversation with you. How's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, I'm going to answer your question maybe a surprising way. I could say, reach out to me at Todd at the 315project.com or go visit 315project.com.
Sure.
But I'd rather have them reach out to their spiritual mentor, their spiritual disciple guy, and share that desire with them.
Cool.
Because we're a very small ministry. Like, we're not even ready from a logistics standpoint to meet this massive tsuami of stories as marketplace leaders encourage each other to turn their hearts towards Jesus and share.
Right.
But God's promises in Acts 1:8 that we'll have the power and efficiency to spread his name.
Yes. Witnesses to all the world.
Yeah, this isn't something that our ministry, I don't feel it's called to solve the problem, but we just want to help be part of the conversation.
Sweet. Yeah, and to help equip the saints for the work of ministry, right? So Faith Positive Nation, what Todd Miechiels is saying is go to your pastor or to somebody on staff at your church or somebody you're in a discipleship group with. Just have a conversation about this with them. What would it look like if we did this? And put our stories up on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you might find yourself, and just see what happens. Now, I mean, if they want to go to 315project.com, they can do that. Todd Miechiels Yeah. Todd Miechiels has a page on our website at getpositive.today. If you're watching it there, you want to click on and go over there, just find Todd Miechiels' page and you'll be able to click right through, or you can go straight to 315project.com. And Todd's got some stuff there that'll help guide you. Wonderful conversational pieces and some ways that he can equip you for doing this work of sharing your story, regardless whether you're a red light, green light, or a yellow light, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Todd, Faith Positive Nation always wants to know from our guest about a favorite Bible verse or Bible passage. So I'm thinking since the project's named 315project.com, I got a little inkling about a favorite Bible verse or passage, but maybe it's something different. What's your favorite?
You would be wrong.
Well, it's so obvious. 1 Peter 3:15, right? That's what I'm thinking. But what's your favorite, man?
Here's the irony, man. Always be ready to give a reason for your hope. 1 Peter 3:15. It's a very cerebral, defensive apologetics scripture.
Right. Yeah.
That's not how God brought me into it. He brought me in on the heart condition of this. So my favorite scripture is Ephesians 3:14-20, where Paul is praying for the saints that we would know beyond knowledge, right? Here, the width, the depth, the breadth, the height of the love that God has for us beyond knowledge, and that he could do possibly ask or imagine. So thanks for asking that question.
Oh man, that's super, because Ephesians 3:20, that and along with the entire chapter of Philippians 4 are my favorites. I love the Dr. Peterson's translation in the Message of 3:20. God can do anything, far more than we can imagine, guess, or request in our wildest dreams. He does it not by pushing us around, but by the Spirit working deeply and gently within us. Man, yeah. I pray that one every morning. That rocks my world every day.
That, right, what you just articulated would be our prayer for the people with the red or the yellow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The red, more you can imagine, brother, sister.
I know, man. Every morning during my morning prayer walk, weekdays, I walk a couple of miles around the farm here. I'm praying that, God, I want to join you in what you're doing, and you're doing anything, a lot more than I can imagine, guess, or request. So that gets me off my throne, because you probably don't suffer from this, Todd, but sometimes I think God's waiting for me to tell him what to do. Like I know better than God, right? Joey, you're stupid again. But instead, if I just say, hey, Joey, God's inviting you to join him in doing anything more than I can imagine, guess, or request in my wildest dreams today. I got some pretty wild dreams too, dude. So, let me just join God in what God's doing. The infinite creator of the universe is inviting me to join him in doing anything. I think I'll take that offer every morning.
Good one.
Yeah, Todd, you're amazing. Go to Todd's website, 315project.com, or go talk to your spiritual mentor, your pastor, somebody you trust, somebody you can be vulnerable with about how you want to talk about your faith at work. And then this whole process of putting up a video that helps share with the world, really, what Jesus means to you. Do that. And man, we'll look forward to more people in heaven when we all get up there one day, right? Todd Miechiels from 315project.com. Todd, thanks so much for the gift of your time and wisdom. Man, I love your heart. I absolutely adore your heart. And I pray God's blessings on you and your family, man. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work, so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.